Sanctuary Pentecostal Church, located at 1901 Jane Street, Toronto. Faith Sanctuary is a church that has been in and served the community for about 50 years in terms of impacting the lives of children, youth, adults, older adults, the homeless, as well as those who are incarcerated. With a well-established history of community service, we are therefore delighted and privileged to host this mayoral debate in partnership with Advocate for Change and Tony Redmond. Thank you, Tony. Without further ado, I'd like to call Pastor Granville McKenzie to come. It being a church, he's going to open in prayer.
Thanks very much, Lucy, and welcome to all of you who are here tonight. Heavenly Father, we thank you for another day in your presence. Thank you for this wonderful city in which we live. And thank you for those who are here seeking to serve our community in greater and more positive ways. We thank you for each one of us who is here, and we just ask your blessing upon this meeting and your continued blessing upon our city. In the name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. A few housekeeping items. The location of the washroom is if you go through the back, turn immediately to your right, and look on your left side, you will find the washrooms there. In case of a fire emergency, there are several exits. Through the back doors and out, you can go through either of these exits, go down the stairs and you'll make your way out of the building, or you can go through those exit signs at the back of the church and you'll also find a way out of the building. Cell phones and electronic devices are either to be turned off, put on silent, or on vibrate. If you would like to video this particular debate, you are more than welcome to do so. The water stations are located at the front entrance, and we are selling water for $1 if you would like some. The agenda for this evening is as follows. There will be an introduction of the candidates. The moderator will facilitate the questions. There will be an appearance of a special guest. The audience will have an opportunity to ask questions. The candidates will have their closing remarks, and then Tony and myself will also have our closing remarks. So to begin, as I call the candidates' names, if you can just stand and indicate so that everyone can identify who you are. The first one, Selena Caesar Chavez. Sarah Climenaga. Frank D'Angelo. Michael Lamoureux. Giorgio Mamaliti. Chris Sokocha. And Nia Singh. The timekeeper is Andrea Peel, and the moderator is Tony Redmond. Tony is the author of a book entitled Leading the Change. He has over 25 years experience in leadership and change consulting. If you would like to purchase Tony's book, please can you see him after this particular session. I'm going to hand over to Tony.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Lucy. I'm going to basically set the tone for questioning. We're all here to hear what these fine candidates have in plan for us in Toronto. I'd like to begin by thanking you all for your offer of service to the people of Toronto, because leadership is a difficult task. I've been involved Yes, give them a round of applause. I'd also like to extend a deep appreciation to our host, Pastor Grenville and Lucy, and the team of Faith Sanctuary. Deeply, deeply appreciate giving us this opportunity to hear what these candidates have to say. Right? And I would want to take this opportunity to ask you all, because we're in a place of worship, to kind of pay attention to, we're talking politics, and politics can lead to contentious issues. But don't forget where we are in your zeal and exuberance to express your position on motions. Please conduct ourselves accordingly and respect the kindness of our hosts and the venue they provided us with. Okay? The theme for today's debate is going to be quality of life. We've been hearing a lot from politicians on all their plans on how they're going to improve life in Toronto. And based on the research and feedback I've seen, it's incredible. We are considered one of the best countries in the world to live in. People are leaving wherever they are to come here, but Torontonians are angry. Torontonians are dissatisfied. Is it that we're spoiled, or have we just become used to excellence, right? So we're going to explore how these candidates are going to improve our quality of life. Not how much money they're going to spend. I've been listening to debates and attending them, and all I'm hearing is, I'm going to put $300 million into housing, I'm going to put $200 million into safety. I've been hearing that I'm in my 60s, for let's say 40 years. I hear about the money that's going to be put in, but I see no results. Every year, crime goes up. Every year, homelessness goes up. I want to hear how your plans, your programs are going to improve our quality of life. Is that what you want to hear? Okay. So, the questions are not complicated, but the problems are, and so the solutions are going to be difficult. I hope these candidates have given good thought to how they're going to lead us into the future, and without further ado, we're going to get right into the first question. Just to explain to you what our rules are, I believe all of you have been privy to the rules and are comfortable with them. And we have a timekeeper who will be keeping a strict order to ensure that this is a fair process. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to answer my questions, and they all have a 30-second rebuttal to argue any point that one of their colleagues makes. Please don't interrupt each other. Just indicate you want to post a rebuttal, and I will give you the mic at that appropriate time. And we're asking you to approach either the podium or take the mic, whichever you're more comfortable with. Okay? So, without further ado, let's go. Based on the public feedback, the number one concern of residents in Toronto are all real estate related. From homelessness to affordable housing to property tax, Torontonians have real estate concerns of some nature. A place to call home is a basic requirement for any quality of life. Given the broad range of people affected by this issue, how are you going to address the housing crisis in Toronto? And I'll start off with you, Frank. You happen to be in the right position.
Good evening. My name is Frank D'Angelo. I grew up in this neighborhood, and I want to thank the Faith Sanctuary for hosting this. I've never been a religious man, but I feel the energy and the spirit in this room. And homelessness is a product of the incompetence of the career politicians that are recycled every 4 years. They've put us in a $1.6 billion deficit. There's $700 million in uncollected fines that are 10 years in default. And now they want to be elected again. And they're making all these kinds of promises. They promise you the sky, the sun, and the moon, and they deliver nothing but thunder showers. And the only umbrella they give is to the top 1% or their donors. The best way to combat homelessness, I'm saying, let's do a lottery, call it the Lottery of Hope. Just like 649, just like Lotto Max, and all the proceeds go towards people, the unfortunate people, and some of them are mentally challenged, that are thrown out in the streets, to put together great complexes where they can get help, where they can get medical attention, and when they can stay safe. Instead of promising things that don't happen. And taxpayers are burdened already with huge property tax. Toronto per capita, the 4th largest city in North America, has one of the highest property tax than any major city. So we need to create equity, and we need to do, so is that the warning, the 10-second warning? Thank you for listening to me.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nia Singh, and homelessness is a very serious issue because homelessness leads to mental health issues, and mental health issues lead to violence. And there's one thing that I've realized as a person who has been caring for a person who has mental health challenges and was homelessness, I've seen the barriers when it comes to the shelter system. So a 28-year-old man who was a recording artist, award-winning, ended up developing schizophrenia and ended up getting charges, and I assisted him. He's a good friend of mine. The first night I got him out of jail, I could not take him anywhere. I went to every shelter and they said there was no space. And I said, you don't have space for a 28-year-old Indigenous man anywhere in this city? And the answer was no. I had to take him home to my house to make sure he was safe. What I realized was lack of sleep contributes to mental health issues. It contributes to erratic behavior, which leads to violence. So what I would like to see is a well-rounded social support system that doesn't work 9 to 5, but works 5 to 9. Because 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. is when people need that support. In order to get housing that we need here in the city, we need to rezone. We have so many areas that are factory areas, and factory areas are not walk-in public service retail spaces. They're spaces that can be placed anywhere. My suggestion is the City of Toronto repurchase all of those lands that are around the city, and I know on Eddystone there's a huge area of flat land with factories. Relocate those to just outside the city and allow those areas to be redeveloped for affordable housing. And we have to have city government built housing because independent developers want profit. They're going to mark up their prices so people have to pay condo prices, but we need affordable housing through the city. Another thing we have to do is lobby to end rent control from the provincial government. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I want to thank you, Tony, and Lucy for hosting this very generous event. Nia's story that he told about housing someone in their home is not uncommon, especially in a time when we're in a pandemic recovery period, when people are really struggling. And myself and my partner have had to do the same when you see people who are cold, when you see people who are homeless. And so there's a multi-pronged approach to ensuring that the city uses the levers that it has to be able to house those who are unhoused. The first is to conduct an assessment of its current assets. The land across the city, we should know where it is, what it looks like, what intensification of that zoning looks like, and how many houses that we could build. Of the houses in that TO Housing Now strategy, thousands have been approved. and not one shovel has gone into the ground. It is about political will. It's the political will to get it done. If housing is an emergency and if immigration is a policy of the federal government, then there has to be a way to ensure that as we're moving forward, we are bolstering that housing. Leveraging empty spaces to ensure that we are housed. Many of us are working from home. A lot of the buildings, a lot of spaces are empty, are vacant. Why aren't we using those for housing? Speeding up approvals. Toronto is the last across all jurisdictions in approvals for housing, speeding that up. Aggressive rezoning, we heard that from Nia. Rezoning that looks at mixed use for people to work and live inside their homes. All of those factors, including bolstering and supporting community land trusts and bolstering co-ops, can help, number one, make housing more affordable, but number two, create the supply that meets the demand. There's a number of ways that we're doing it, but there isn't the political will to get it done. Thank you.
Two minutes goes by so fast, but thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So real estate, housing, homelessness, affordability, and availability. So my philosophy is to sort of reframe this whole question and say, what's government's role when it comes to housing? And I think these campaigns, we act like the mayor can fix housing, the mayor can find homes for everyone, the mayor, and that's not working at all. That approach hasn't been working. So what I think the government needs to do is just eliminate barriers to housing. There are so many zoning barriers. There are so many bureaucratic barriers. There are so many permit barriers. The way the city spends money is problematic. There's not good accountability. There's, again, 40,000 staff dealing with all these different things. I think we need to look at Toronto's housing crisis as a bit of a success. So many people want to live here. So government just needs to step back and let people create houses, create units, and we're not doing that right now. And as far as the issue of homelessness, it's a very case-by-case issue, and I think the city needs to take each person who is suffering homelessness. They have a different situation. They have a different network they can depend on. They have a different reason why they're not in a shelter or a home. And I think the city needs to work with neighborhoods on a case-by-case basis to find the most cost-effective, most compassionate way to deal with each case. There's not one solution to homelessness. There's not one solution to affordability. So I just really think our government in general, we need to completely redefine our role in governance and assign much more power to communities and the people who can actually do things on the ground. And really taking away all the bureaucratic hurdles to housing would do a lot to increase housing in this city. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to talk about the housing issue by breaking it down into 4 different groups. Actually, there's a couple of numbers we need to know first. So there's 3 million people living in the city of Toronto. That means 1.2 million households in the city. At the very bottom, unfortunately, are the 10,000 people who are homeless. All the solutions for every group is going to be a bit different. That's going to be a very expensive solution to implement. I won't get into details here, but I mentioned it on my website. The next group of people is the 20 to 25% of the people in the city, the households that are, it's approximately 300,000 households who pay 30% or more or of their income on rent. The next group are the people who may not pay so much on rent, but they're trying to save money in order to buy a house. And the last group are the people at the top who are financially secure, they have a house or they're on lower rent. Those people don't need much help. The city cannot possibly build the 300,000 housing units that would be required to help people who are paying too much rent. The solution to help those people would be to stop the growth of the population of the city of Toronto. It puzzles me greatly that every candidate in this debate and all the pundits and everyone else says the only thing you can do is build more housing when it's a supply and demand issue. There are things that can be done, and that's what I want to make this election about. If the people of Toronto support, there are things that we can do to push back to the province and the federal government, because we saw during the beginning of the pandemic, when there were no more residents coming into the city, rents went down 10%. And if we continue that kind of a practice, the rents can come down for hundreds of thousands of households. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. 3 topics, 2 minutes. I'm going to be quick so we can get through them all. Homelessness. The main tenet of our platform is fiscal responsibility, smaller government, lower government spending, putting people and families first. We expect to free up over $1 billion from the budget, which we can then use to not only provide homes for the homeless, but provide individualized programs to address the 3 main causes of homelessness: someone losing their job, a mental health problem, or a drug problem. When you give the people a place to stay and you give them a way to get back as an integrated member of the community, they're going to be more successful. When it comes to the housing crisis, with my 20 years in develop, design, and build, I can tell you the main cost for a house is the over 30% of government fees, taxes, and levies. This is because the process takes too long and is too expensive. So if we created a program that would streamline the rezoning, redevelopment, and building process, we could save big developers many years and many millions of dollars, which they could then use to not only develop more houses in the same amount of time, but lower housing costs overall. Now, to benefit the community, to get this benefit from the government, they would have to give a percentage of these units back to the government at a hefty discount, so the government can release them to lower income or first-time home buyers in a rent-to-own program. Not only will this open up home ownership to a vast majority of the population, but it will integrate less wealthy people with wealthier people, which is what we want for the community. With regards to property taxes, I'm the only candidate that actually has policies that's going to bring actual revenue into the city. When you have higher revenue and lower government spending, surprise, surprise, we can lower taxes. I'll be the first candidate that will put a moratorium on all the property tax, and I'll be the first candidate that will be able to provide a tax rebate for the seniors. And I don't even need the last 10 seconds, and I gave you 3 plans for 3 problems in 2 minutes. Thank you, everybody.
Hello, everyone. I'm Giorgio Mammoliti. Been in politics for, thank you, been in politics for about 30 years. Was with the City of Toronto, as you know, and a member of provincial parliament for a number of years. I held the positions of parliamentary assistant to 3 different ministers that included health and the Solicitor General. I wrote the official plan on how to and the law on how to treat addiction in the province of Ontario back in 1991, and I still believe in the 12-step program approach. I also wrote the affordable housing policy for the City of Toronto, and if you look at Regent Park as a prime example of my work, you'll know that my attempt to build affordable housing worked, and I will continue that effort by making sure that places like Rexdale, places like Jane and Finch, places like Scarborough are rebuilt into a mixed form that includes social housing, affordable housing, and that also includes a mix of condominiums. Everybody in the city should be living together, not segregated. We have segregated our population for almost 100 years based on the color of their skin and their income. With me as the mayor, that stops. It stops with building a mix and making sure that people feel comfortable with the communities they live in. The gangbangers will stop on our social housing communities. They're keeping people hostage. Crime, like you wouldn't believe, they're killing each other. The 1% of the people that are in this lifestyle are making it very impossible for us on our subways, for us on our sidewalks. We're the ones to blame because we've decided that the best way to deal with the social issues and those that may be addicted to drugs is let them die on our sidewalks by letting them take drugs and having $200,000 salaries watching them take drugs in front of us. 12-step programs is the way to go. With me as the mayor, you get the knowledge, you get the work that I've already started, and I'm sorry, for taking up too much time. I get so emotional. Thank you.
Affordable housing, affordable housing. All the top candidates use that term, affordable housing, and they say they have a plan for it. But they never tell you what that plan entails, and every single time it means raising your taxes, appropriating that money, and promising you that the government's gonna build you a certain amount of homes in a certain amount of time. And what happens? Your taxes get raised, that money goes missing, nothing gets built, and you guys get excuses. Beware the term affordable housing. Ask them how they're gonna pay for it.
Thank you. Chris is right. When it comes to housing, in Ontario exclusively, housing and social assistance has been downloaded to the municipalities by the province and the feds without the appropriate funding formula. Carving out new revenues for housing is the best possible solution. Continuing to raise property taxes and use property taxes for things that big cities should not be using property taxes for is not correct. That is not the way you run a big city. Having those revenues directed towards housing and social assistance is the way to run a big city, and that is what I'll do as your mayor.
Just to continue on what I was saying, the simplest solution is usually the best solution. If you keep building housing and everything else, we're going to run out of land. There's just no way it's ever going to happen. We built 400,000 units of housing in the 40 years of Toronto, and has it helped? No, not one bit. We absolutely have to address the demand side in order to solve the problem for hundreds of thousands of people, not just the few. Thank you.
So I'm just going to elaborate for a second with the affordable housing plan that I wrote. It's there. It's for us to take. It's ready. It means the private sector, bringing them to the table as well. A lot of empty land around these large apartment buildings already. Nothing wrong with building in between them and having the private sector do it for us. With respect to the homeless, I want to say that shelters are not working. They don't work. It's transitional housing that needs to be built. I wrote that policy. We can easily do it. Transition away from the typical homeless shelters, move them into transitional housing, and transition them into society where I think they would appreciate as well.
I don't understand. Right now, what's going on in the city of Toronto is rental eviction. They're taking affordable housing that exists right now. People have lived there for generations, and what they're doing is they're pretending that they're going to fix the place up to boot those people out and make them very expensive 3 times, and that's how it's perpetual homelessness. Stop building luxury condos and stop rental eviction, Mr. Ford, you pompous asshole.
So when it comes to this issue, we have to think about what's happening now. We spend too much money as people. We can't control the prices, but what we can do is control what we spend our money on. As a mayor, I would definitely set the tone in the city that we can be more self-sufficient, cook our own meals, don't rely on processed food or Uber Eats. Do our best to reduce user fees. Do our best to reduce all the extra expenses that we have as a family, and people work hard and save as well, because at the end of the day, we can't rely on anyone else but ourselves.
Well, that was a good way to start off. There was some good discourse and conflicting ideas. So I'll move us into the second one. We'll get back into this topic in the second half of our debate, where we get questions from the audience. So I'm going to move on to the second piece now. The quality of life experts measure quality of life in 5 areas. We touched on one, which is our physical surroundings, our homes. The second one is our economic and physical safety. Crime, our well-being is dependent on, in the world we live in, on money. And of course, we're facing increasing in crime every year although more and more money is put into crime prevention, crime seems to go up all the time. So under your leadership, how are you going to keep the people of Toronto safe? Let's start in the middle with Sarah.
So it's a good question, but I'm also going to reframe it because I think it is the question that we're asking mayors, and I'm not going to keep Toronto safe. We are going to keep our neighborhoods safe. We are going to be responsible for our safety. And what the government needs to do is not infringe on our ability to be safe by having, for instance, surveillance. I'm really opposed to the surveillance approach to crime, where you try and monitor every single inch. Neighbors can look after their neighborhood, not cameras. Then the spending money. Do we need to throw so much money at the police force? Do we need a forcing method of controlling crime? The police, even if we gave our entire budget to the police, we couldn't prevent everything that happens. Crime happens in our own homes. Crime happens in the alleys behind us. The police cannot prevent crime. They are excellent tools for solving crime and for emergency crime response. So again, I don't think my approach to safety isn't based on police preventing crime, and it isn't based on surveillance. It's based on eliminating any rules that make no sense that we prosecute people for, and just having the most important, violent crime, and obviously like terrible property approaches. But otherwise, we have so many bylaws at the city. We had ridiculous laws in the past 2 years where we're arresting people for going to playgrounds or whatever the things were during the lockdowns. So I think, creating a friendly, safe, creating a safe city comes from creating a caring city, and the government can model caring in its approach to its residents and in the way we look at safety in our own lives. So I just think it's about empowering citizens, empowering residents to have what they need. Thank you.
There are many factors that contribute to the reduction in safety in the city. I just want to talk about two of them. One is the neighborhoods that we have. I think that the crime is far less in low-density neighborhoods than it is in high-density neighborhoods. That's another factor as to why I don't believe that the city is going to be, the quality of life in the city is going to get any better if you keep increasing the number of residential towers and the residential towers in our neighborhoods. So that's one factor. The second factor is the chance of someone being apprehended if they commit a crime. I don't want to catch people necessarily. I want them to know that they will be caught so that they will think twice about committing a crime. I do believe that the presence of police regularly patrolling neighborhoods and the subway system is important. I actually do believe you can make their job easier through closed-circuit television, CCTV, and those are the two primary things that I think that we can do to make our city safe, as well as pedestrians on the street. I do believe that's important as well, and I don't believe, it strikes me as peculiar ever since came to the City of Toronto that we don't have a pedestrian safety program. We do not promote pedestrian and cyclist safety, and we do a fairly bad job of it on the cars as well. So those are the things that I would do to make the city safer. Thank you.
So, personal safety, economic safety, and I'm going to add one more thing, moral safety. So for personal safety, we need to first repurpose the police service back towards community policing. Having the officers on the streets, in the communities, being part of the communities, getting to know the citizens, that's the best deterrent for crime. And we're going to be able to do this because we're going to use the same fiscal responsibility to cut massive waste from these budgets. We're going to be able to hire another 1,000 service workers. That's going to increase response times for our fire and emergency service workers. With regards to economic safety, I'm the only mayor that not only started a nonprofit to help the small business, which represents 70% of the jobs in the city and 97% of the businesses in the city, well, I'm the only mayor that won't close them down. I'm also the only mayor that's going to offer a new program that's going to offer interest-free loans to those businesses that were successful prior to getting shut down by the government. And we're going to reinvigorate and we're going to reassure the small business community, which is the backbone of our community. And with regards to moral safety, we need to protect our children. And we need to protect our children from this nasty agenda called SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity, creeping into our schools and turning Pride from a simple parade to now a season. Pride season is now costing Torontonians $2 billion when we have a budget shortfall of $1.5 billion. Eliminating that and relegating it back to a one-day parade could solve our budget shortfall overnight. How's that for safety?
Boy, I wish I could dance like that. Look, the city of Toronto is broken, folks. Now, some people criticize me this election because I'm a bit too brutal and too honest with respect to that. The city of Toronto is broken morally as well. The city of Toronto needs to go back to the basics in every aspect, including what they service us with. It's coincidental that we are in a faith institution because that is a part of my platform. Bringing faith back into society, not taking it out. What's happened over the last 30 years is we've taken punishment, us politicians that do believe in God, that do believe in a God, are taking punishment because we make our decisions based on what God would want us to do. That's how I've governed myself for 30 years. That's how I've been honest with people for 30 years. And our streets have been loitered with woke. Woke has ruined this city to no end. The politicians have caved to that culture over the last 30 years, and while you were sleeping during COVID, while people were telling you to stay home, because they thought it was best for us and for you, they spent billions of dollars of tax money that belongs to you in building bike lanes, putting our hotels in jeopardy by creating shelters in our hotels in local communities without consultation. The reason that the streets are unsafe is because government took advantage of you during COVID and spent all the money doing things that you don't want. Your communities have been infiltrated by woke, by people that are going to harm you, by people that don't want families, by people that don't want culture, by people that don't want faith. And now we're asking ourselves, what happened? Oh my God. Let's wake up.
So, I find it ironic that the ex-police chief is running on safety. Where was he for 4 years? Here's the problem. I sound like my mother speaking to her sister in Italy. Here's the problem. So you commit a crime, you get arrested, you get out on bail. Commit another crime at the same day. The same day. Next day you're out on bail. We live in a great country where there's law, but there's no justice. Stop. If you breach your bail, forget about it. No more bail for you. You're going to jail. You want to take crime off the street? Don't keep putting them back. And the other thing that's very important to all the communities in Toronto is community centers, places for the youth to go. My dear friend Spider Jones has got a great community center down at Jane and Chalk Farm. And it gives purpose. People hang around with people that bring out the best in you. The old adage is, don't live with somebody you can live with. Live with somebody you can't live without. You need to build a future for the kids. And it's going to cost about $200,000, $300,000 a year per youth center. You get that money back triple, quadruple, because you save those children from the street, from the evilness of the street. Don't listen to Saunders, another career politician. You want faith? Put the faith in the people that are going to take care of you. My vision is your vision. Thank you.
Crime prevention is something I've been fighting for about 30 years. Ever since I was 19, I opened a recording studio. It was one of the first hip-hop recording studios in Toronto. And it had youth coming all the way from Durham region, York region, Peel region, and all of Toronto. And what happened is when people are engaged in arts and things that actually mean something to them, they have less time to do delinquent behavior. So in order to prevent crime, we have to understand the causes of crime. It's generally poverty, broken homes, instability, and lack of education, right? As mayor, I put a 10-point plan out in 2018 when I ran before, and I ran in 2022 and I did the same thing. The first thing in that 10-point plan was to stop all suspensions and expulsions in school. The reason why I say that is when you expel someone from an learning education, they start to feel like they are the other. They start to feel like they're persecuted, and they start to feel like they have no hope in the system. Our system has to embrace young people with problems. They're not born with problems. They develop them. And our education system is the first line of defense against that. So we must make sure, as a city, we have more recreational programs, we have more sports programs, and more arts programs, right? One thing that I've seen, there's a young girl who wanted to volunteer with my campaign back in 2017 when I ran for another thing. She has been homeless for 9 months, right? She's exhausted all her resources, but won't go to a shelter because she's scared. She feels like she's going to be robbed, she's going to be assaulted. There needs to be more transition homes for youth. There is not enough supports for our youth. And crime also permeates through the adult community, yes. Alcoholism, right? Addictions, mental health again. Quality of life, if we're gonna raise that in the city, we need a mayor who's gonna lead by example. More police is not the answer. Police do a good job. They have everything under control. It's the people that need to support each other to do better. Thank you.
So if we use the incident that happened at Kiel Station, O'Brien Tobin, the accused in the murder of that young man, as a microcosm for what is happening across our city. If we look at the evidence of that, the police did their job many times. That young man was arrested multiple times. What failed was the social programs that surrounded mental health supports, social assistance, housing, the capacity to get a job, community center supports. Those all failed that individual. Now remember, in the previous answer, I talked about the fact that social assistance and social housing has been downloaded to the municipalities exclusively in Ontario without the adequate funding formula. If you do not have adequate funding for all of those different supports, we will continue to see what was happening with O'Brien Tobin. The evidence is there. But the evidence also shows that when you make investments in community programs, when you make investments in social assistance, there is an 11-to-1 return, meaning for every dollar you put into social assistance, mental health supports, housing, you get an $11 return. You know why? Because those individuals are no longer in the streets committing crime. They are working. They are buying their homes. They are going to entertainment. They're doing things with their family. It's about looking at the evidence and not saying just put a bunch of people in more body-worn cameras spending hundreds of millions of dollars. Use the investments. Toronto is broke. We can't even afford $2.9 million for the SRT. Let's be real about how we're making these investments because the evidence is there. Put them into communities, put them into social assistance and social housing, and make it work for everybody. Thank you.
No rebuttals on this topic? Okay, I guess.
The families, the majority of the families out there that are struggling to pay their mortgage or rent for that matter. They'll tell you that they need a job. They'll tell you they need more food on the table. They'll tell you that the best way for us to be sound and safe is for a full family structure to be healthy and safe in their own house. That's what they'll tell you, right? Instead, what we've done is we've created a whole culture around social services. Nothing wrong with that word, but when it takes over your community and your city, then we start wondering why we're having problems with the way people are behaving. Now, I know that that's not comfortable for a lot of people to hear. At the end of the day, no, you're gonna do your typical rant and rave. Come on up here and dance.
Okay.
Go get fingerprints.
We're all right. We're not going to be late. Let's calm down.
You need a mayor that's not in jail.
Okay. 73 charges. We don't want any crime here. We just solved the problem, so we don't want to have any crime here. All right. This question touches on what most of the billion most respected people on the planet have come to a conclusion that our current approach to business and development is accelerating the collapse of our environment and threatens our very survival as a species. Every year we see the intensity of climate disasters growing more and more around the world. And now, we in Canada are one of the many countries experiencing record-breaking natural disasters. However, there's another school of thought that we should just ignore the scientific evidence and continue with the same development model. The question is, where do you stand on the issue of environment and sustainability, and how will your plan deliver a healthy environment to the next generation? All right? And this time I will start with Selena and move in the other direction.
So when we think about climate, we have to think about what we want versus what we don't want. And one of the best ways to address the climate situation, especially in Toronto, is when it comes to transit. We don't have adequately supported and funded transit system that takes people off the road. We complain about gridlock. We complain about the traffic and the amount of time it takes for us to get to and from spaces. But why are we making those adequate investments in our transit system in the way that allows it to be safe, equitable, and for people to be able to work on that system? And when it comes to the TTC, we have to make sure that it's safe. So I already spoke in my previous response about what happened at Keele Street Station. But making sure that there are appropriate safety response teams within the TTC is critically important. They work with examples of loft or street to homes that allow for that to happen. Prioritizing investment in frontline workers and staff, ensuring that people find safety in there, but also having fair equity zones. Some of people in Toronto have paid increased fares for a very long time, but have not had the increased services. If you want people to get off the roads, you need to make sure that you have an adequate alternative for them to go to. Most importantly, when it comes to our transit, having cellular connectivity. The deal that we have with Rogers is not an adequate deal. Ensuring that people could get on the TTC and continue to do what they need to do is important. Otherwise, they'll take the fastest method, they'll be in their cars, and it'll continue to our carbon footprint. Thank you.
Sorry, can you just rephrase the question so I can make sure I touch on everything? I get into deep thought sometimes, and I want to make sure I hit all the points.
The context, I guess you get it. It's climate, the climate challenge we're facing. Where do you stand on the issue of environment and sustainability, and how will your plan deliver a healthy environment to the next generation?
So the problem is the province controls most of our environment, yes. But what we have to do is we have to understand what climate change is versus what's natural. And as a mayor, I would be honest with the population. My strong belief is we've confused climate change with pollution, right? Climate change happens naturally. We went through an ice age, the earth heats up and it cools down. What society has tried to do is make the population feel they are responsible for the warming of the earth. What we have to realize, it's industry, out of any of us, it's industry that's responsible. It's the big companies that pollute. We got rid of coal for a certain amount of time, but they pollute the air. They make the air unsafe. They make packaging, plastics, that are disposable, right? So we have to start reflecting and start thinking, can we reduce our consumerism? Can we reduce how much we take in and spit out? Can we make sure when we buy food, we utilize it and don't waste? Because the more we waste as a society is the more garbage that collects, is the more pollution that happens. It's the depletion of the climate, right? So we have to understand our role, but we also have to not be misled by messaging that makes us believe we are the only sole responsible people. One thing I would like to see as mayor is monthly community cleanups. Something about the environmental pollution is also disturbing to us. We have streets that are littered. When I grew up in Toronto, Toronto was a very clean city. But I'm sure when you look around now, you see how dirty it is. Right, so we have to do things to make sure our society is safe, make sure our society is clean, and lead by example, because the young ones coming up, they don't know what it used to be like. We have to show them what it used to be like. So as a mayor, I'd be dedicated to all types of clean environment, but also personal responsibility and holding the big polluters responsible. Thank you.
The environment is the most precious asset humanity has, but it's never going to be fixed, or it's never going to be slowed down in the degeneration of what's happening to the environment, because the politicians are hypocrites. And the hypocrisy of the provincial government in Ontario on environment is despicable and disgusting. The guy wants to cut down trees that have been there for decades at Ontario Place so he can put a spa there so he can get a pedicure. I don't understand. From one side of his mouth, they're telling us we need to recycle, we need to create less garbage, and he's creating more garbage. And now he wants to get rid of all the green spaces to make his friends rich. I believe in environmental consciousness. I believe that we all have to pitch in, but the government cannot be a hypocrite in a subject so vital as the environment. The environment is like in your house. If you don't keep it clean and you don't take care of it, you're going to start getting mice and cockroaches, and you're going to get sick. And that's what we're doing to our planet. We're abusing it. And fossil fuel is the tobacco industry of transportation. We need to start either taking public transit or getting into hybrids. Even the Toronto Police Force, all of their vehicles should be hybrids. There should be no Toronto police with the budget that they have driving gasoline cars. Hybrids are just as quick, just as fast, and 30 to 40% more economical. Stop talking about what they can do about the environment. Start talking about what you can do to protect the environment. Thank you.
I'm not sure if many of you know this, but every time you take out your recycling bin and you do your job as government's told you to do over the years, and you do it effectively, almost 90% of it goes back into the landfill. They don't tell you that. You're wasting your time. So as mayor, one of the first things I'll do is give the responsibility back to our city employees to separate your garbage. Because then it will go meaningful. It will go to the areas that will recycle properly. It won't end up in your landfill. It's one of the first things I'll do. We don't have much time. It's 3 years. Second thing I'll do is make sure that our traffic flows equally across the city. Getting rid of bicycle lanes will be one of the ways I'm going to do that. And I mean all of them. I mean all of them, and I mean building a proper cycle path across the city that's safe for people off of the roads. If you did that, we would flow the traffic out nicely around the city. What's creating a problem are all the cars that are backed up, and they're backed up because everybody's trying to go to work in the city of Toronto, where it is a nuisance everywhere. The other thing I'll do is get rid of the streetcars. The streetcars are causing us a lot of problems financially, and they're backing up the traffic as well wherever they are. Let's put one of them, let's remember the streetcars. It's wonderful history for us. Let's showcase it. But when it comes to the environment, a part of my solution is to make sure that people aren't congested with their vehicles trying to get to work or to a sports event or wherever they have to go. The other thing is using the private sector is going to be very important. Private sector, believe it or not, still haven't really bought into e-vehicles. They haven't. You're the ones that have to pay for it, and when your battery breaks, you're in for a $10,000 or $15,000 charge. It's incredible what's going on with government trying to tell you what to do.
When it comes to climate change, it's really important not to give into climate change hysteria. We've been under a climate emergency since 2019, according to our government. As of 2022 in May, while we were still under the COVID emergency, they enacted a new bylaw that enabled this 15-minute cities. Now I'm going to educate you. The Toronto Star said that 15-minute cities will drastically change Torontonians' lives and should be the #1 topic of this mayoral campaign, but it won't be. And why? Because I'm the only one with the balls to actually talk about it and tell you how bad it is. The other candidates want the 15-minute city where you're going to be giving up your car, where you're going to be living in a mixed-use building that doesn't even have parking. This is what they want for you. And we have ways to look after the environment while still looking after the people. We want to create a private corporation within the TTC that's going to create 2 new subway lines and do it with private investment that actually brings revenue, GDP, jobs. They're going to be responsible for upgrading the lines with the security and the Wi-Fi, repairing and doing all of that while the city retains control and revenue. That's going to take traffic off the roads. It's a green solution, and it doesn't negatively impact the citizens. It actually makes their lives better. With regards to the garbage solution, we've already taken the initiative to talk to high technological companies that can provide us incinerators to burn our garbage with 0 emissions and provide us clean energy back to the grid free of cost. We can do environmental solutions that work for the people. We don't need to do environmental solutions to control people and reduce their way of life. And with regards to this electric stuff, oh yeah, Chrystia Freeland just spent almost $1 billion, $750 million on 360 electric buses when she could have bought the diesel versions for $150. That's a waste of $600 million literally overnight. And that's the kind of waste that's involved with this green agenda, and we need to cut it out of our budget. Thank you, everybody.
I think we can't lose sight of where the world is going on this. Toronto cannot stand all by itself and ignore the rest of what's happening in the world or this country. We do have to address the climate change issue. I do believe there are ways to do it as long as we are conscious of how difficult it is going to be and what the realistic goals are. I don't believe net zero is possible, but I think we can get at least 50% of the way there. So the 2 things that are the biggest emitters of carbon in the city are transportation and our home heating. The city's been talking about this for years and years, but they haven't done a single thing about making sure that people have to put an electric source of heat in their buildings. So that's the first thing I would do. Any new building permit, you have to have an electric source of heat. It doesn't matter if it's your home or if it's a residential tower. You might still have to keep your natural gas. I have to concede on that for cold days, but that's the first thing that needs to be done. The second thing that needs to be done is on the inner half of the city, we cannot, unless you have on-site parking, you cannot buy an electric car unless you got a cord over the the sidewalk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to immediately allow all people, regardless of whether they have an electric car or not, to be able to park on their lot, or we build laneways in the back where they don't. And there are ways to make parking expensive so that people are more motivated to spend the time to build parking on their lot. And some trees are going to have to come down, but that's just the way it has to be. On top of that, free subways to get cars off the road, including replacing streetcars. I have plans for that. I think that's a great idea. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
So I think we made a mistake. I'm an environmentalist. I worked for World Wildlife Fund in my 20s and studied conservation biology. And I think we made a mistake in the environmental movement of turning it into a religion and a moral thing. And then climate change came along and we doubled down on the religion. And now it's a question, do you believe in climate change or not? And it's a ridiculous division. And it's not something that we should be, in my opinion, talking about climate change. What we need to talk about is what we all agree on. We want to breathe fresh air. We want to drink clean water. We want to see flowers. We want to see trees. We want an environment that feels good and sustains us. So focusing on our division, which media loves division, government loves division, our egos love division, it's a red herring. So we all care about the environment. Now, there's things that some of the candidates have said that I've disagreed with, but there's a lot of things that I've agreed with in our approach to the environment. I agree with Giorgio Mammoliti. The recycling program is garbage, and I learned about that in my 20s. I agree with Chris that this emphasis on climate change. There was something else you said, Chris, that I just forgot it as I started talking. I agree with Selena about the need for transit. I agree with Nia about not focusing so much. It's our fault. And focusing on industry. We have an economy that we've inadvertently developed that takes beauty and turns it into trash. And that's just what happens, unfortunately. And we can I think we need a transformative approach to our economy so that what we create is beauty. We create beauty. We create clean air. We create clean water. And, so we require a transformation of our economy, but we do it together, not on either side. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Allow me to introduce our candidate. Apparently, had some challenges getting here, but this Habiba Desai is our 8th candidate. Habiba, I'll let you fall right in and let you repeat this question for you so you can participate. This area is about the issue of climate change and the environment. And basically the question is, where do you stand on the issue of environment and sustainability, and how will your plan deliver a healthy environment to the next generation?
Hello? Okay. Yeah, I'll start in the name of God. Okay, so cool. I believe in the environment. So if you love God, you have to love the environment because we are all connected. So we do all worship the same God, and that same God created this environment and this nature. So we have to respect the creation of God like each other. We are each human beings, but we also have to respect the creation of God, which is nature, which is the water that comes. It is a miracle. The gardens that we have, this is a miracle. The fruits that we get, easily we can get animals to give us milk. These are all miracles. So like we keep saying, God, give us a miracle. Imagine how many times our people for generation and generation asked for miracles and God sent them. And then they're all here and now we keep denying the miracles. So for me, my solution to climate change, instantly I can clean the air. How? Free TTC. So I'm not asking for taxes. I actually created an innovative solution using technology. So the way that you can make the TTC free without using tax dollars is when you go on the TTC, just like Twitter and Facebook is free. How is it free? Because you get advertising revenue. The same way, all you have to do, download an app, you watch ads while you're commuting. So now you're getting credited for your commute. And now, right now, advertising revenue for the TTC is 25 million. And that's just static posters. Now we can do digital advertising. So not is it just large corporations that can advertise on the TTC, but local businesses per stations can also advertise. So that's hyper-local. So these are real solutions. So not only are we opening up the advertising to large corporations and now charging way more, and now that the TTC is free, it goes up from 60 million to 120 million. People don't want to drive as much. People don't want to buy cars as much. We're now also reducing our dependency on fossil fuels. Hi, my name's Habiba Desai. I'm going to win.
To all these religious zealots preaching their climate change agenda, why is it that every one of their climate solutions requires you and your family to sacrifice more money, more freedom, more mobility, and more opportunity for your future? You think it's just a coincidence, or you think this is a method of control, just like COVID was? So take heed, ladies and gentlemen. Do not believe the Pied Pipers. Every single climate prediction has been wrong and has come and gone without fanfare. And all they want is your hard-earned money, and all they want is your children's future. We can look after the environment, and we can look after our communities with solutions that help the people, not control and limit the people. Reject the climate change agenda.
I absolutely agree that the biggest barrier to achieving our climate change objectives is not the technology, it's the expense. Chris, you're absolutely right. It's going to be hugely expensive. But, what I believe, though, is it still can be done and it should be done. What the government has to figure out is how to reduce your cost in one area so that you're not any worse off than you would be otherwise. And the biggest way to do that is either through reducing your cost of housing, or if at all possible, reducing your taxes. Thank you.
I'm just kind of rebutting myself. I just remembered what it was that Chris said that I felt so resonant with, and that was about the waste of money on the electric buses and the government subsidy. And I just wanted to say that money and energy are very closely related. So whenever we're talking about spending a lot of money for the environment, that is probably costing the environment. And so it's really like it's a red herring. So let's just, again, look at our neighborhoods and do what makes our neighborhoods better. That's how we act.
The world has evolved. At one time, we are garbage makers, from just eating to human waste. We developed a sewage system to get rid of that garbage. We developed the technology. We need to do the same thing with garbage. I agree with Giorgio, that we've been taken advantage of by the governments in charging us for recycling when they're not recycling. We need to respect pollution, or it will kill all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, okay? I don't know that we reached a conclusion, but we certainly have some bright ideas to consider. At this point in time, we're going to switch the program a little, and I'm going to entertain some questions that were emailed in from audience, from many of you, but we're going to take a 2-minute break, get some water, give the candidates a chance to stretch their legs, and we'll begin in 2 minutes. I want to invite you all to please give a contribution to the church for allowing us to operate in this venue. There's a donation box placed, I believe, in the front here somewhere, and one at the back. So please give generously so we can appreciate it. Thank you very much. Back in 2 minutes, maybe 5.
All right. Please, can everyone be seated? Thank you. We are going to begin. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's start the second half of our presentation. Now, these questions would have been submitted to my website by people who registered to attend. And there are a lot of repeat questions. I don't know if people collaborated on this or not, but we're going to make sure that I touch on a couple of topics. And if we have time afterwards, I would either give the candidates an open mic to speak about their platforms or entertain questions from the live audience. One of the most popular questions that came in had to do with the concept of the 15-minute city, right? The 15-minute city, for those who don't know, is an urban planning concept in which most daily necessities, things like shopping, education, healthcare, and leisure, can be accessed within 15 minutes, walk or bike ride of where you live, right? And that concept has drawn a lot of attention and a lot of ire. There are some cities that around the world that are examples of 15-minute cities, and I will leave the candidates to discuss that with you and what their position is on 15-minute cities, if it's something good for Toronto, and would you incorporate it into your plan. Let me start with you, Michael, and move in clockwise order.
I live in the Riverdale neighborhood, and for all intents and purposes, it already is a... I'm on? Okay. Thank you. For all intents and purposes, I already live in the 15-minute city, and it's great. I hardly have to drive anywhere except for coming here. However, I have to acknowledge that that is only a fraction of the city. There are not many neighborhoods that are 15-minute cities. The problem I have with when people talk about the 15-minute city is I think it's a gimmick, because there's no way you can move all kinds of buildings around and neighborhoods, etc., to configure them the way my neighborhood is already configured. You wish it was they were already that way, and I wish that you could move it that way, but we can't. So I think it's just a gimmick when everybody talks about the 15-minute city, as I've heard myself on television. They don't really talk about the details of how to do it. So for all intents and purposes, as much as some of us have that luxury, it's not practical.
15-minute cities is the single biggest threat to the prosperity and future growth of our Toronto, period. It literally relegates you to a little square block, and it gives you no opportunity to own a car. It's not about convenience. When you're living in a building and all the new buildings have 500 residences, then commercial and retail at the bottom, you're expected to live in that building, work in that building, go to the gym in that building, do your laundry there, meet your friends at Starbucks, etc., etc. In other words, you're living in a prison society. I was in Oxford, England, which is one of the first examples of this society in the world. They have already divided it up into 6 districts, straight out of the Hunger Games, and each district is now misrepresented with barricades, physical as well as cameras. It's a surveillance city, and it's about getting you to give up the way of life that you had and come into this new way of life where you have to get used to having less and less and less, and we're not going to have it.
Well, it took me about 15 minutes after reading some material on 15-minute cities to figure out that it is communism at its worst. And for those of you that don't believe me, it's all connected to what you're seeing on the streets today. Today we talked about safety. We talked about how to make sure the streets are safe. Let's talk about who created the unsafe streets. It's woke. Let's talk about who created the problems that exist in society today. It's woke. 30 years of woke have now created another slang term called 15-minute city. What it really means is that you won't be able to drive your car without permission if you're driving within 15 minutes of the city. What it means is that government wants to control you yet again. What it means is what you've seen during COVID is your taste of communism, 15-minute cities. You may as well be living in Cuba, folks. You may as well be living in a country that isn't going to give our children the freedom that we're wanting. Thank you.
I'm going to, in 2 minutes, discredit the 15-minute city. You know what the 15-minute city is? Bureaucratic caca, right? What they want to do is take the rich parts of the city and give them all the attributes. You can't even make a 911 call today in Toronto without being put on hold. 911 and you're put on hold, and now they're talking about a 15-minute city. Wake up, Toronto. These ideas from these career politicians are stupid. And it don't make sense. It takes you 15 minutes to get from the bathroom to the front door. And you're gonna go around the city in 15 minutes? Let's worry about how we're going to help Torontonians cope with the cost of living, where toilet paper is $9 now. Where you go to a supermarket, you spend $300 and you leave with paper towels and a few odds and ends. 15-minute city is garbage. Thank you.
So this is all about psychology, right? If you think about it, a 15-minute city makes sense when you think about the convenience. You can shop, you can visit whatever resources you need. The way the media has been controlling our minds since its inception, it's about making you think you want something that you don't really need. Developers generally build developments in that way. They build a house or an apartment and they try to make sure there's a shopping plaza near and a doctor's office. So these are things that we've already been doing. But what is happening is now they want people to reduce their travel time. They want people to stay isolated. They don't want people to communicate with each other. And that's what these 15-minute cities, to me, in the forerun, is what they're setting up for. So it seems like most of our panelists get that, but what are we going to do to change that? Just be careful of how you speak about it, because people like it, but you can tell them the truth about it.
So let's for a moment just throw away the title of 15-minute city. We want accessible spaces. We want to be able to sometimes walk to the grocery. We want to be able to access fresh foods. There are food deserts in Toronto where people cannot access. There are places in Toronto where there are predatory lenders. We want to make sure that Toronto has equitable access. And right now, it's not the time to be talking about 15-minute cities because we've developed a city that doesn't have that. But going forward, we want to make sure that people, especially our elders, our seniors, our young people, have access to groceries, to fresh foods, have access to places where they could exercise and play, have access to places that they could visit, have access to education. It's not a zero-sum game. It's what we want. We want spaces where people can thrive. And that, just remove the title of 15-minute city and focus on what we want. We want a city where people could thrive and live and work and play. And that's what we need to work towards.
Yeah, that was a great answer, Selena. And I also don't want the 15-minute cities that Chris is describing, that Giorgio is describing. And I think that if the government is talking to us about 15-minute cities, what I would say if someone said to me, I would say, oh, can you remove zoning so I can work and live in the same place? Because right now, you're not even allowed to do it. Can you make the streets in front of my area safe? Because right now, I need to get in a car to be safe. Can you give me a park that's beautiful, a pool that's nice, community recreation, so that I don't have to drive halfway across the city? So like 15-minute city, we need to turn it on its head and say, hey, can you give me, you want me to live in a 15-minute city? That's great. Can you make it possible? Because the dialogue is like imposing it on us, live within 15 minutes. And as soon as it becomes that, as soon as it becomes control and lack of choice, it's off the table for me. But it's an opportunity to turn it around and say, make it possible. Thank you.
I'd just like to add that the primary purpose of a 15-minute city is not convenience. You could look it up. It's to reduce your carbon footprint. And the one way they want to do that is remove cars. And every time they take a lane where there's vehicle traffic and they turn it into a bike lane, every single small business on that street goes broke, because now they can only get people coming from a 15-minute walk or bike ride away. So this is a way to kill small business. This is a way to transform your city into little tiny prison grids that are virtually identical, with only the big box stores left standing. This is really bad, and you do not want it for your children or your future.
I just want to add one more thing. If you go to downtown Toronto right now, you can't go straight, you can't make a left, you can't make a right, can't park your car. So it's not the 15-minute city, it's a 2-hour city. They've destroyed the entertainment district. They've destroyed the restaurants. Shame on the career politicians.
I believe that this agenda was driven by people that live primarily in downtown Toronto. I believe the suburbs, Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, York, have been neglected. They're not the ones that created the 15-minute city. People that created the 15-minute city are the ones that want to do all the damage to this city, the ones that are creating the problem to begin with in our city. They're the ones writing this policy. They were in front of me at City Hall. I was the only one challenging them. I was the only one bringing this stuff forward for almost 30 years. I haven't been there for 5 years. Or you would have heard me probably the only one complain about COVID, for that matter. I believe the suburbs are being destroyed because of people that want to ruin our city. And 15-minute city is an agenda by the people that want to ruin this city.
This crowd is enamored with contentious issues. The next question has to deal with SOGI. Okay, yes. You sent it in? SOGI, for those of you who don't, is Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Education. And so the question simply is, where do you stand on that? Are you supportive of SOGI in our schools or not?
I am intimately familiar with SOGI because I fought it in Alberta when it was implemented and took it all the way to Adriana Lagrange, the education minister. And I had mothers go into the libraries and pull out books that were available to 8-year-olds that show male-on-male prepubescent oral sex, and books about men raping their daughters. And they read this to children. Then they bring in a ginger man and show 76 genders and all these different pronouns. And they make your children as young as 4 play games where they choose their gender and choose their pronoun. And now they have laws in place that if they can convince your little son Jack that he wants to be called Jill, they'll call him her, they'll call him Jill, and they will not inform you, they will not ask for your consent. And then 6 months later, when Jill puts on a dress at your house and you're all concerned, CPS is going to be knocking at your door wondering why you're not affirming your child's gender. This is about sexualizing children, confusing children, perverting children, so the state can become the #1 influence in their life over the parents, and parents need to stand up to this vehemently and call out these child groomers for what they are, and we need to enforce the laws that are already on the books. There is 171.1 and 171.2 against child exploitation. These are laws on the books, and they need to be enforced.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but remember where we are. Thank you. Go ahead.
What people are talking about in their living rooms is safety. They're talking about not trusting people. They're talking about making sure their children don't get stabbed or killed if they're taking the subway. They're talking about where they're going to find food on the table. and they're talking about how all of a sudden a man dressed like a woman is reading to their children in libraries and in our schools. It happened during COVID. It happened while they put us all to sleep. When I talk about woke, this is what I'm talking about. It's a group of people that are driving the agenda. In this particular case, we have to stick up for God. We have to stick up for what's right in society. There's only he and she. There's no they. When I become the mayor, there will be 2 bathrooms, a male and a female bathroom.
That's an ugly, ugly, ugly subject. You know, somebody on Twitter said to me, Frank, what's a woman to you? So the answer to me, specifically to me, Frank D'Angelo, what's a woman to me? My grandmothers, my mother, my daughters, my sisters, and my partner. But in saying that, I think that everybody should be happy in the moment, because life is a moment in time. But I also believe that you should not punish a heterosexual for being heterosexual. You should not punish a gay person for being gay. As long as people live within the law and everybody's protected, everybody should live the life that makes them comfortable in their own skin. God bless you. Thank you.
It's a very serious topic that can't really be covered in a minute, but I'll do my best to share my views as a mayor of the city. Just like Frank, I believe people's private life is their private life, but the question relates to schools. And I think this sexual education has taken the joy out of young people learning and understanding themselves as they grow. They're being programmed to think a certain way. It's up to the families to educate their children. And when it comes to school, it's up to us to teach biology, not ideas and emotions, right? We all have different sexual preferences, right? That's your personal business. Schools should teach biology. When the kids are an appropriate age, they should understand what the parts are, what they do. But beyond that, I think it's a transgression into the home. And it's dangerous because there are various ideas being flouted that people may not agree with or understand. So, personal choice.
Well, I think it is important that parents be the first line of defense for their children. I have 3 children. I also think that people should feel comfortable in their own skin. And I think as a society, we do not, let me just back this up a little bit. As a Black person and as a female, there were times in our history where I did not have rights. There will be no way, shape, or form that I would infringe on somebody else's right to live their lives. It just won't happen. When it comes to our education system, not only is that a provincial issue, but I think that parents are the first line of defense there. And there is an opportunity for parents to have these candid conversations with their children, while at the same time respecting people's individuality. So I understand the pronouns. I will use them as mayor. We will have gender-neutral washrooms, and I will not apologize for those views.
No, booze.
So again, I think that the media, it serves the media and it serves the government when we are on either side and when we are screaming at each other and when we feel that anger and that rage. that is serving the media. They want to put us against each other for ratings, for audience. So I think it's so important for us to just take a breath. What I want in my city is that everyone who comes and sits in these chairs feels welcome and can come in, whatever their choices are. I'm going to talk with schools, I'm going to talk about bullying instead of what I don't understand, because I don't know about all the acronyms. So they try and teach don't bully at my kids' school. They don't learn not to bully from the no bully curriculum. They learn not to bully from their friends, from a caring environment, from their parents, from their communities. And I think that's what we need to do when we want people to feel welcome, is to just be welcoming, not to impose it.
Thank you. One of the things that's always bothered me about city politics, and actually politics in general, is that we tend to get distracted very easily. This particular topic isn't one that has any kind of city legislature or rules around it, mostly because it's about education and it falls in that field, and the mayor does not have any power over that. So I've made it a rule in my campaign to not make any comments about social topics unless it's specifically related to a law that the city can pass. And that's my position.
Hello. So I think love and tolerance equals respect for all beliefs, which means there's only two genders. And I did put my scarf back on because I think when we take truth and we turn it into lies and then we claim that's truth, it's devilish behavior. And I fear the devil, fear God more. But yeah, so the only candidate, that's me, the other six, Saunders, Chow, they're okay with putting the pride flag in municipal buildings. So I'm saying no, not just to schools, but municipal buildings as well. And that's to keep it apolitical, because the pride flag is a political flag, okay? So the reality, because who is it that now we're saying we're not including? So is it the Muslims, right? So in the Quran, it says that there's only two genders, male and female. It says that male and male sex is a sin. So why, and I believe the Quran, I believe in the Bible as well, and I believe in the Torah as well. So these are holy books. These are laws given by God. Okay, so as your mayor, I will stay apolitical, and I will make sure that our buildings and our schools are apolitical. And that's all. Thank you.
30 seconds.
So I also believe people should be able to do what they want in their own homes. Don't push your values or your objectives onto families. I think that's going on right now. I'm not sure if any of you remember this, but a number of years ago, the federal government came down with some statistics. Pedophiles that were being released in our jail system seem to have been locating, this is the federal government statistics, in Parkdale. I released that report. And instead of people in Parkdale saying to me, thank you for letting me know that there might be a pedophile living down the street, they crucified me and said, how dare I do that? That gives you an indication of what's going on. And the other thing that you need to know is that the same group that I talk about are now looking to change the name of pedophilia to a sexual preference. All right?
Thank you. Okay. Well, that took a little longer than expected, but it was riveting. We're reaching the end of our time frame, and I know these candidates have a lot more to share with you. I want to give them the opportunity for a minute and a half. Can we work with that? Thank you for taking the time to watch our presentation. For more information on the critical issues that affect us, please visit our website, advocateforchange.com. And don't forget to subscribe and share. Thanks again. Have a great day.